no screen up, so got it. There it is. Okay, yeah. So here it is. Oh, it's not. Oh, I have to do it like this. Yeah, now it's starting. Okay. Good. I would say good morning. No, that's from my perspective. From your perspective, it's good afternoon.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so
Okay, here is 2 p.m.
yeah, that's correct. So we have two perspectives and we are talking in the same reality. And that's also something about qualitative research. Sometimes you as a researcher have a perspective and your audience or your topic you're researching has also kind of perspective. So that's good to know that I'm living in the morning, you're living in the afternoon, and now we are sharing our lives for a few moments at least. So that's how to do that. And that's also in qualitative research. My main concern is how to keep the focus on theory development. That's what I'm going to tell. But before I'm going to tell something, participants can now see your screen. That's good. This is my name. Bart-Jan is my first name. This is my family name. My position at university is assistant professor at the Faculty of Economics and Business. You can see my phone number. Yeah, that's what I'm working. And for those who have never been in Europe, well, my university is in the Netherlands, and that's in Europe. So here's the picture of Europe, and you can see the world. Belanda is over there.
Tidak ingin ada risiko gitu. Jadi,
sorry,
kalau misalkan
Doctor. I will mute some participants. Wait a moment.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is the Netherlands and in Europe, so you can see it. So this is my first slide to show. There, if you go to the Netherlands, most of the people do know something of Amsterdam, as people from the Netherlands do know something about Indonesia, that the main city will be Jakarta. I will tell you later something about that. So we are living up in the north, 2.5 hours. No, it's about 2.5 hours drive. So is it that far from Jakarta to Bandung? I have to know. No, that's even more, but like a distance like that from Amsterdam to Groningen, we have over there a university, and that's the University of Groningen. It's a rather well-known university, although it's a very old one, more than 400 years old, I think even older already. So it's a classical university with all kinds of classical faculties, as normally we have about 25,000 to 30,000 bachelor and master students. There's about 10%, no, it's about 15% international students. At my faculty, Economics and Business, that is about 30%. So we have a lot of PhD students. There's a lot of academic staff. Of course, we are proud of that. We are a research university, so we produce a lot of publications. That's also one of the output parameters to see at the university. The university is situated mostly in the city center, and half of it, and the other half is on the campus. So that's like in Jakarta, where it's also, I think, mostly on the campus, and in Surabaya, I don't know where it is. So this is our faculty. It's a building, huge one, 9 floors. You can see it over here. We have a budget about 36 million euros, about 330 academic staff, consisting of full professors, associate professors, assistant professors, tenures, PhD students. We have got about between 5,000 and 6,000 students. So with the Faculty of Law, we are one of the biggest faculties in terms of students. In terms of money, it's a Faculty of Science, of course. The hard ones do have much more money. So our faculty is doing well. We have accredited in all kinds of varieties. We have a business school as well. Come on, I have to go. Oh, it's blocking. No. There it is again, sorry. It was stopping. So this is about university. About me, you have already seen my face. I have to check the time. Oh, it's going rather well. I'm living in a small village close to Groningen, about half an hour drive from Groningen. And that's a small village with old buildings and old houses. This is a kind of impression of the city center. There are 2 canals in it. So there are we are called the Venice of the North, like the city in Italy. So it's a nice city, old roots. Oh, It's blocking a bit. Okay, there it is. Sorry. So this is about, yeah, it started directly. Well, I'm working at the University of Groningen, Faculty of Economics and Business, assistant professor. I'm teaching on organizational theory and on research methodology. My research is focused on what happens if you are in remote areas. How can you stimulate entrepreneurship there? How can you support families who are trying to survive and help them with entrepreneurial activities? That's why I was invited in 2005 to do some research, to do a project called Local Economic Development in Indonesia. And that was trying to support teams from remote areas in setting up economic activities. So for that part, I traveled a lot from 2005 to about 2011 through Indonesia. So I have been in Jakarta, Bandung, Surabaya, but also Medan, Palangkaraya, Singgawan, Poso, Palu, Manado, Bintang. No, Bintang is the beer. Poso I went. So I have seen some of your remote areas in your country. And there I did research also. I will come back on this. So my lecture will be on how to keep the focus on theory development when. And now if you're not listening with your smartphone, but with another device, make a picture of this slide, because this will come back some moments. So I have split up my lecture in 5 parts. It's both focusing on theory development, so getting to know something better. And that's what we have to learn to do in research. It's about theory development. And that's paying attention when you formulate your main research question. How is it related to theory? When you talk about what you want to describe, what kind of theoretical concepts are you using, and how to capture the empirical world? How can you bring in the theoretical perspective? That's also when you do data analysis. It's not just doing something, but it's doing something to know something. That is to theory development. Then you also have to know something about a theoretical principle in that part. That's about grounded theory, if you like it or not, but then at least you have seen it and you can look it up on the World Wide Web and check what we mean with that. And then later on, of course, if you do qualitative research, you have to do case study research. That's not only to do case study research. I do case study research in order to develop my theory in a specific way. So the takeaways, the main takeaway is focus on theory. That's what you have. It's every time. So most things, what I'm telling you, are based on what I've studied and I have published with a colleague in the Netherlands in this book in 2010. It's the essence of research methodology. It's published with Springer. It's still running rather well. The book is in English, but for you, if you think it's too difficult, well, at least read it in Indonesia Bahasa. I've made a translation with Dr. Sari Wayuni from University of Jakarta. And so that's one of the translations. So then you can start with that. But if you want to refer to it, refer to the English edition. And that's not that difficult, because if you type in the title of this book and my name or the other name, then you will find enough illegal copies of it on the PDF on World Wide Web. So you can find the English version and you can read the Indonesian Bahasa version, because that's almost the same. That's to remember. So that's easy to find back, but that's some homework. You have to do it yourself. So and then it starts with, I'm starting to count with the 0, but this is number 1. Research is at the end always focused on what will be theoretical contribution. Always will it be how to publish something, in what kind of format, in a journal article, in a research report, in a bachelor thesis, in a master thesis, in a PhD research. It's always on the theoretical contribution. That's what you have to learn. Okay, and then, sorry, my pointer is often stopping. And then that's important to keep, how to keep the focus on the theoretical development, because that was also nice in the start. It was about operation management. And then if you want to do research, you need a problem. Yes, but most of the time students are focusing too much just on the problem. That is, if you go to Surabaya and you go to Bintang, Heineken, and you have the opportunity to go inside and see how they fill the bottles with beer, then you become interested in how do they manufacturing it? How do they produce it? What about the quality of the product and how to sell it? Yes, those are managerial problems, but you have to pay attention also to theoretical questions and theoretical developments. And one of the theoretical questions might be, what will be the management style and how does a certain management style, so how does the manager contribute and how does, if he behaves in a certain way, how does that contribute to the way of manufacturing and how does that influence the quality of product? So to add that one, so to have these three blocks in it, almost concepts, way of manufacturing, quality of the product and management style, those are the concepts and how they are related. That's the theory. So you have to know what theoretical contributions and theory means. And then it's good to find out the most practical examples on the World Wide Web and also in these presentations, because if you go in the books and look for what is a theory, then you can become in a field that's very messy and very difficult. Take care of what does it mean, theoretical contribution, in terms of a problem of this. It's about looking around in the company, what's happening, but you have to raise theoretical questions, for example, like what's the management style and how does it influence what's happening over there? So then it means more in an abstract form, it's about a management style, will develop, will influence the effectiveness of solving problems in companies. And that might be also, depending on the cultural context, it does matter if you do this kind of research in Surabaya or if you do that in Amsterdam. So the context might also influence. That's why we added over here in the middle, see if it works, there the cultural context. There you see the management style and there's something of the problem solving of how to manufacturing and how the brewery is working and how the quality of the beer is and how you can keep that on a certain level. And it's about how to find these concepts to catch the empirical reality. And this is what we publish. Of course, we also publish about this, but this is in the heart of the reasoning. So that was one. And then if we have a research question and we focus on that, then we have qualitative approaches. But for that, what does it mean? I know in your context, and I'm also teaching in East Africa and Tanzania, if I'm teaching there on qualitative approaches, then they directly focus on qualitative techniques, so like in-depth interviewing or focus groups. But before that, it's qualitative approach. It's not only about the techniques, but also about what's your focus. There you have to pay attention to. So let's focus. It's about the main purpose of your scientific research. That's what you have to pay attention to. And now we start with kind of high-level philosophy to learn something about this, but I should end up with something very practical. So if you don't understand the stuff I'm now telling in 5 minutes, don't get nervous, sit down, try to understand it, and then at the end it will be very practical. It is related to how your research question looks like. So there it is. It firstly starts with, what do you see? Oh yeah. I'm always surprised to my own slides again. Yeah, what do you see over here? Now, if I was with you, then I would raise your questions. What you could see is you could see a picture with blacks and whites dots. But if you look more closer, then you could see, if you focus on this, there could be the dog, a head of a dog, and these are his legs or her legs. So there is standing a dog, an animal. Don't get nervous if you don't see it, because that's also something about qualitative research. You collect a lot of data for what? So you're looking at the empirical reality and you see this, and what do you see? And what do you learn from what you see? So there is something, reality is complex and concepts to look at it are hard to find. How do I look at this picture? Do I start with simply observing? Or do I start with closing my eyes and think, what could I see if I go there? What would I expect to see in a brewery? Or what do I expect to see when I look at this picture? That's kind of attitude or kind of reflection on when you start research you have to do. And that has to be related to theory. Now, if you look at that picture over here, sorry for switching all the way, then you can start with looking with a fresh look and without anything in your mind, or you can start looking at it with something in your mind and would say, if I'm going there, I think I'm going to see animals, and I think I'm going to see dogs. So let's see if I see a dog. So that opens up something like, in terms of philosophy, if I start with, I think I'm going to see this, that means it's deduction. On the other hand is, if you look over there and you try to see something and try to make it imagination, then it's about induction. And that's related to how you formulate your research question. And that's related to the old philosophy, at least from philosophical parts, from the European perspective. That's for me, if you look at the screen on the left side, it's about, if you start with an ID, that's always, you're going to look at it. But the next one is, ID will be worked out before observations are started. So you look at that picture and think, I think I'm going to see a dog. And then you can start looking. And then you try to rationalize. So then you try to rationalize your reasoning and coming up with, yes, I can see what I'm supposed to see, the dog. Or on the other hand, you start looking and think, it could be something, but I don't know yet what it is. Let's have a look and let's discuss with others if they are also looking to it, and try to develop the idea during the observations and after the observations. There it is about inductive reasoning. Now, this is about philosophy, but if you look on the left side, that's more that if you formulate a research question with already included everything you expect to see and try to check if it's there. So that's always the same if you have a hypothesis formulate that's more closely related to the deductive reasoning, or on the other hand, you go there and try to learn what's happening in that brewery, then you will develop your idea, and that's more related to inductive reasoning. So there it is. So that's, and what we call is, if you do deductive reasoning, so you are formulating something you expect to see, then you close your imagination on forehead and are going to check what's already in your mind, if it's there or not, and to what extent it is there. The researcher has decided at what to look at and will not add a new perspective during the research process. So in that, assuming that it looks like that, that should be related to the theory development. That's the theory. And that's about which concepts do you have in mind and how are they related. So now I have to look again. There's something, this is an example, very practical one. What will be the influence of incentives for the CEO on the output of a company? So look at the brewery where you saw the manager. If we could give him much more incentives, would it have an influence on the output? That's the question. So then I've closed my imagination by only focusing on the incentives for the CEO and the output of a company. And that's it. And I'm trying to relate these ones. So then I have a closed perspective, a closed research question. And I start with a theory about incentives to the CEO and the output. That's my theory, that they are related. And for that, I'm making a hypothesis. If the incentives are increasing, I think the output will also increase. And then I'm going to check to certain companies if that's the case, where there are low incentives, there are high incentives, and how it is with the output. And then do I have a confirmation? So then on the other hand, if I go to the brewery and I have not an imagination of what could happen, then I think it's more open. I'm going to find out all kinds of details and try to find out how it is. And that means the main interest is searching for the unknown. So your research question will be open. That is, for example, which factors will influence the cooperation between managers who work together in the management team? Now, yes, we are focusing on cooperation and how to work together, but it's open in that way. We do not know which factors we want to include in that. And that's, in that way, it's open. So having a research question or open or closed is not a matter of it's or open or closed. It's a continuum from closed to open. But here it's much more open. The researcher will focus on searching these unknown factors.
I'm
So
sorry,
then-
Mr. Barjan, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
a question from Miss Endah Prapti. Can I describe my research background into the reality narration, like we describe the situation?
Can you once more repeat it?
Yeah, Miss Endah would ask about how can she describe her research background into the reality narration? Can she doing that? Describing the reality narration in his background. Sorry, his research background, maybe, yeah.
Yes, Mr. An, we had
Okay.
asked about the situation. Yeah, I mean the background of the situation that
Yeah.
I can
How to write the background about the situation in her research.
Yes, the situation as background of the research. I mean.
Yeah, I switched off the PowerPoint for a moment so that you can see my face. Is that correct?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you very much. I was very strict in saying, okay, we start with, if you look at reality, then you have to know, are you going to start with an open or a closed research question? And then, of course, you can say, how do I add more about how that phenomenon, what I'm researching is, how do I include that? That's one question. And the second question is, if you say about your background of what's happening over there, that you should confront with your research question. So so if you say, I want to add something about how my topic looks like, yes, that's important. But finally, at the end of your PhD or your bachelor, master thesis, or your journal or article or your report, it's always on how is it related to the theory. And then I would feel like if you talk about your thing like my background, that's about, oh, it's an important situation I have to do research on. So why am I looking at the brewery? How is it? How does it look like? How does it differ from? And there I say, mostly you should not focus that much on the background. You should focus on your theoretical focus. That's important. And then in doing qualitative research, it means you pay attention when you start with your research question, realizing if it's closed, then you're coming more to the quantitative research techniques. And if it's more open, you come more to the qualitative research techniques. Did I answer the question?
Okay, thanks, sir. It's clear for me.
Yeah. Is it answered your question, Miss Endah?
No, Miss Yeti, I have.
Mau bahasa Indonesia dulu, enggak apa-apa, Ibu.
Oh iya.
Ya, gimana?
Maksud saya begini, Bu Yeti. Jadi saya ingin mendeskripsikan situasi, ya situasi itulah nanti yang saya angkat sebagai sebuah permasalahan dalam riset kualitatif saya seperti itu. Seperti
kuantitatif atau kualitatif?
Kualitatif.
Oke.
Jadi saya menggambarkan situasi dalam perkuliahan, kemudian hal-hal yang menarik, kemudian sebuah perubahan yang terjadi pada inilah partisipan dan seterusnya. Maksud saya seperti itu.
Oke, Bu Yeti, saya bantu translate atau Bu Yeti?
Oke. Jadi silakan. Kalau that Miss Endah want to ask is about how to make. I think it's already answered by the theory.
Yep.
Yeah, the theory that you can connect the situation with the theory. And Mr. Endah want to tell about the situation in the research object, in her research object, about the school, about the phenomenon that happened in her object.
Oke. Jadi tetap kita menyandingkan dengan teori ya. Jadi situasi itu kita sandingkan dengan teori ya.
Yeah,
Okay,
but-
okay, okay.
Can you understand, Mr. Bajan?
Yeah.
She want to ask about the situation and how to connect with the theory. Maybe
Okay,
like-
okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's okay. That's a different question because you first, okay, I will try to answer. Then you have to make a differentiation between how to include the situation that you are
Yes.
researching on. That's the
In.
start of why that's helping you to make more clear why it's interesting to study this
Yes.
part. That's one.
Okay.
But the focus should be then not on that describing the importance, but more on how that importance can be related to a theoretical perspective.
Okay.
So if you're doing research in a school, then it's interesting to tell, I want to do research in that school. Then I say, that's nice. That is for the management problems interesting. But you should also add something like, what are we going to learn from it for the theory?
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's important. And then how to relate your theoretical concepts to the empirical situation, that I'm going to pay attention to in point number 3 or 4.
Okay. So it's okay if we want to tell or write about the situation, but it has to connect with the theory. Is that correct, Mr.
Definitely.
Bajan?
So if I see a report with 20 pages of the situation and then finally coming up with the research question, then I would say, no, first the research question. And for that 1 page of, it's important to pay attention to this, blah, 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 in 1 page, then your research focus, and then comes up how within that research focus, your situation is interesting.
Okay. Okay, I think it's already answered the Miss
Okay.
question. Okay, you can
Okay,
continue.
thank you, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for raising a question.
thank you,
That's really
sir.
good. So this is here where we left. If you're going to research your own situation, then you have to realize, what are you going to do? So that's also, if you want to include your background or your field, what you want to research, if you already start with that in the introduction before your theory, then you give already away a lot of your information. So you have to consider where you put which part of the information in your research activities. So that's something in an open research, you start over there. You start with, you want to come up with something new, but you don't know yet where to have a look, although you have to focus a bit. That's what in the open research question comes up. So here it is, kind of short summary of this point. It's going well into, on the left side, we have, you start with a closed research question, mostly quantitative worked out, starts with theory, confirms an hypothesis, tends to use quantitative research techniques. On the other hand, there is also the open research questions, looking for new ideas, but it's not totally new because you have to embed it in what you already know about that situation. It tends to use qualitative research techniques, and it ends up at the end with an hypothesis. And on the left side, it ends with testing an hypothesis. So that's the difference. The idea, and then coming back to the closed research question, you look at your question, do I look for something new, or do I try to confirm something what I already theoretically know? That's the idea will be worked out before observations started, and the other one in open research will be, idea will be worked out during and after the observation. So if you don't understand anything about deduction and induction, look at your research question. Are you formulating a hypothesis, and are you testing that hypothesis, or are you trying to develop a hypothesis so that at the end there is a part of the hypothesis? That's what we do. Now we're coming up for how to use concepts, how to find these ones, and what kind of role do they have in your theoretical development. So it's not just on counting in the world, it's on using concepts. So I took with me an example, and that's something to read. Yeah, now we have all kinds of difficulties because it's a difficult language. It's difficult to understand what it is, but I will read it aloud. That the procedure, it's telling something about what's happening in a kind of reality. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. It's important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many. In the short run, this may not seem to be important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, however, it will become just another facet of life. Now, why do I take this with me? This kind of description of something in reality. And if you want to know what's going on in this short description, then the next slide will say, oh, it's this. It's about doing the laundry at home. Looking backwards, the procedure is quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups from different colors, black, red, white. If you put it all together, your white stuff becomes blue and the red stuff becomes more gray. So it's doing the laundry. But now it is, oh, that's the laundry, of course. But it's about finding out this kind of concept. Doing the laundry at home is doing the laundry is a concept. But how to find these concepts? Now, that's important in open research because it's never just describing a situation. It's always describing a situation with a focus. And when you have a closed research question, this focus is totally defined with concepts and variables. In an open research, it's more like, it could be this, but it could also be that. Let's see and start looking around. So that's always, if you look at this construction place, it was from my hotel in Dar es Salaam. I saw this place. And if you look at it in terms of, this is the description of a situation. Yes, but it becomes even more interesting if you see this as an object of study. What's my focus on this? Would I focus in like the concepts of how much construction materials are they using? Or will I do study on how is the hierarchical relations between these people? And then we could imagine, if it's about staff, then we could see how much construction material do they have and how does it come over there. But if it's about hierarchy, why is this guy in another way dressed than the other ones? So
I'm sorry, Mr. Barjan, I got to interrupt you once before we go far. This is Mr. Ali want to ask about the paradigm with that research. He know that we have three paradigm: positivism, post-positivism, and critical methods. Is that correct, Mr. Allen? Yeah. And then he want to ask about, is it possible to use the critical paradigm in qualitative? Yeah, considering there was a very interesting argument about Plato and Aristotle in your slide before, then he also interested in the critical view of Frederick William Hegel, or Hegelian, with what is called dialectic. Yeah, is it possible to use critical dialectic in economics?
I would say yes, because a very formal answer is economics is also a social sciences. And Hegel is writing about social sciences, so it can be applied. That's one. Although, yes, so that's one. Secondly, if you introduce these three paradigms, then in the world of research methodology, there are a number of books written about paradigms. And sometimes it's take care of too much of philosophy in doing practical research. So that's a warning. And this is, my lecture is more on practical doing research than on philosophy, but if you focus on that part, then it's interesting to see how the philosophy about these paradigms are related. And yes, then the critical paradigm fits well with an open research question. But I think also the critical design could match as well with the closed research question. So in that way, what do we learn from it? This is on the level of work, not directly related to the paradigms, although I have introduced now something like deduction and induction, and that's more on positivist and post-positivist. I won't confuse the audience too much, but yes, the critical approach is possible. Yes, it's good to apply Hegel. There's no problem with it. Be aware of that. That's on a high abstract level, and I'm trying to work it out on a very practical level. So that's good to see where it doesn't match 100%. It doesn't mean it's not okay, but then you have realized both levels well. That if you can find where are some things that does not match 100%, that's okay. Okay. I hope I did answer the question in an attractive way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barjan. I think it's enough. We can continue. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for raising questions. That's really fun. So here but where to look at this picture? Oh yeah, there it is. Well, you need a focus. And that's something what we call, and that's also part of a paradigm, Although, yeah, I would say it's if you start within the open research question paradigm, or if it's a paradigm thinking, then you need a focus, and there's something related to from the theories from that. It's about a sensitizing concept. It's kind of in which way I'm going to look at that picture. That's interesting. And there, if you do it in a critical perspective, then you would say, how do I go to look in the brewery, what's happening? And do I include not just the management, but also the employees and also other stakeholders from outside? And how do they interact with each other? But here it's about the ideas. If you're going to start looking in a reality, you need a sensitizing concept. And what is it? Instead of giving more definitions, I will do that's something about an example. Yeah, there it is. It starts with a simple example of if we want to know something about management teams, we can go to the social psychology literature and find out what it is: cooperation, output, ways of working together. But how about if we want to learn from the management teams themselves? What do they think is a team, and how do they present themselves? That might be a way of learning about what they think a team is. So what the researcher did was making pictures of teams. This is how they wanted to be presented. These are top management teams from companies from the Netherlands, and they had the opportunity to have one day a professional photographer with them, and they said, we want to be presented like this. Show it like this is, or show us a company that the management team wanted to be shown like this. This is telling something about that management team. And this as well. And this as well. Now, so there's partly in qualitative research, we make use of visual methods, and we hope to find a thick description of the phenomenon. What is a management team? And we focused on how they wanted to present themselves. If you like, I think, yes, there it is. Take the contents, take the content take into account the context. So I will go back to some of the pictures. How is the image being constructed? How is it arranged? What kind of colors do they make use of? And if you look at now, it's also attractive to see. There it is. Come on. I will come back to this. If you look at these pictures, you can see these typically from Europe, not from all over the world, not from West Africa or East Africa, not from Java. It's just from originally Dutch people, how they are Dutch companies, how they present themselves. And that's also limitation of the research results. Based on this sample of pictures, we could conclude now something about what we know about management teams. It will give you a thick description. If you type in on the World Wide Web, thick description, you'll find the literature on that. It's also that you get something in-depth understanding. Now, I've got also two pictures about how they presented. I have, that's been done by a journalist in the 90s. He was looking at a company, Ahold, Albert Heijn from the Dutch. So this is a supermarket, and this was in their annual year report from 1 year. And they were presenting like, this is our management team from a rather huge supermarket retail company. And some years later, they were not just doing business in the Netherlands, but all over the world. And in a new annual year report, you could see again the same picture, but now on the background, the international context. And they did something on editing. Look at one guy. Look over there. Look at his hair. He got more bald. And this one is the same, but he got some more hair. And they did change it, if you can see. So it's about how do they use the pictures. And it's also, there are books. So this is not for this presentation, but later on, if you can find it, there are books on how to do the visual record. So nowadays we give people, ask them with the smartphones, make pictures, but it's about ethical considerations. Where do you make pictures from, and where are you asking people and informing them? Are they voluntary participating, or is it more confidential? Not everyone wants to be on the picture. How is it so ethical? In an ethical way, think about it, what you do. I've got so if you look at these teams, that's something to learn. I've got a second example as well that's showing also in depth about how it works out, and it shows a next element as well. So I went also in a study project with students to Brazil in 2007, so a long time ago. And what did I do over there? We were interested in how do companies present themselves, because you can read a lot about companies in Brazil and you can make assumptions about how they are. But I was interested in, if I'm not making these assumptions, how can I learn something from what's the culture of in Brazil's companies? So let's start with how companies do present themselves. So in one way or another, what kind of image when companies give to the visitors, that was my concept, that was my sensitizing concept in learning something from how do companies present themselves at the front door. Now there are some pictures. This was inside a bank. This was also on the street. This was also on the streets. Later on, you can look at them again. But what did we do with these pictures? It was about what's your global impression? Remember your sensitizing concepts. So it's not just one word, but it could be a sentence. What kind of image companies want to give to the visitor? Is it that they want to be impressive, that they are important, or that they are open, or that they are closed? Those ideas we could learn. Now look at the second shift of pictures, the same. Is it more open? Is it more closed? Is it to make impressions? Is it to not making that importance of saying, well, we have an entrance, but it's not of importance. Everything can go over here. Or yes, if you enter over here, you have to be impressed that you are small and that you should be humble. Or over here, it's more that you have some art signs. Or here, if you come in with us, it's all safe and secure, and you're going to be protected. So again, these ones, so here it is, again, these pictures. Imagine what you do if you look at these pictures of doors, then it's the choice of that you make pictures of the doors and how that you focus on how they present themselves as companies. Did it change your global impression? Did it become more detailed? Did you notice new details that cause you to think of it in a more than a global impression? Yes. So what we do is, and I want also to tell, is it's about not only about sensitizing concepts as a third point, but it's also about the starting question. Your sensitizing concept is important. The data. It's not just the pictures, but also the notes you've made, your thoughts. And if you have discussed this, also a report on the discussions. So here we can see that the data are not only your pictures, but also your notes. So the data are interwoven with the analysis, looking and reflecting on what you see. And finally, you come up with what kind of pictures you had, but also about what is the global impression. That's the theoretical focus and the theoretical contribution. So data collection and analysis are interwoven and still keeping the focus on theory development. That's important. The next one is about also in Brazil. That's also how do managers act in order to get things done in a bureaucratic world. It's also an illustration of how this is interwoven. And then on purpose, I took an example from Brazil because I could have also taken an example from Indonesia. Then it's not about, I think the next one is there. No, I will first introduce. I did this with a master student. After that study project, he went back to Brazil and was interested in, is there something typical of Brazilian business? Yes, and there is something that's called Jeitinho Brasileiro. And does that influence, and what is it, and does it influence the business? So that was a rough indication of the research question. And it's about how does Jeitinho, how they call it, I don't speak Portuguese, but how does that influence the way people do business? And will it influence the culture? But I could easily change this idea of, oh, sorry, there it is, in facing, if I would do this in Indonesia, about how will gotong royong, if I could apply this in companies, how would that affect the business? So the Jeitinho is a social mechanism widely used in the Brazilian society as a problem-solving strategy. Sometimes it's like bribery or something, it's helping people, but it's not bribery because it's negative. They do solving problems to help each other. First time you give something, then you take something. It's not on a balance. That's something about Jeitinho. And then the research question became here, and it's not the best, but it's what's the concept of Yatingo in daily business for Dutch and Brazilian business, and how does it influence how people work together? It's to learn something about that sensitizing concept in terms of research, Yatingo Brasileiro. And what he did was, and here it's important to see, read about the literature. Second, have interviews with people who are coping with it. Go to Dutch people, go to Brazilian people, and make a combination of these ones. And try to learn something about the concept of Yatingo Brasileiro. And we could simply replace this, go to Indonesia and learn something about gotong royong in the business context. So not in your society because it's there, but how does it influence work in society, work in the management fields? This is what I'm going to skip because, but here it is about the blocks are the most important. Ways of Yatingo will influence getting things done in the world of management. So what we did was kind of concept idea of what's in the society, trying to apply it in the world of business. And that could be done with Yatingo in Brazil, it could be done with gotong royong in Indonesia, it could be done with Ubuntu in Africa, it could be done with in the Netherlands about noberschap. That's a Dutch word, something about taking care of your neighbors and in a specific way, how will that influence the business? So data collection and data analysis are interwoven. It's always focusing on that sensitizing concept. The focus is to develop the content of this concept. That's important in interaction of data collection and data analysis. That's opposite to what we do with hypothesis testing, in which we first have theory, then data, and then confront data and theory with each other in two separate steps, and the theory is not changing. Here, the theoretical concept is changing and is growing. So that's related to the principles of grounded theory. That's a kind of paradigm, still time. It's the principles of grounded theory with a short example. It starts with kind of data. It's about a man and a woman in a kind of working situation. And she said, I cannot work with this program. And he says, what's the matter? I cannot cope. You say you would ask a professional. It takes too long before he can have a look at it, assuming that the professional is a man. It could also be a woman. And then he said, shall I have a look at it? Please, if you would. All right, I will have a quick look. So this could be a short conversation and it's kind of illustration of what kind of data we have. Oh, there it is. And then it's what with the above text in mind, try answering the following questions. What's the matter in this situation? What's the matter here? What's the problem? Does everyone share the same opinion? How could you gain insight in what exactly is happening over here? Should I ask them? Should I observe them? Should I compare it? What should we do? And there's something in the grounded theory there is kind of how you would approach this situation. You have kind of data and how to learn from it. And then in this definition of the grounded theory, it's the next scheme is the local reality we have. That's the short conversation. We listen to that conversation, we make out of it data. We write down what we have heard because there was much more told and seen in that short conversation than I already told. Then I told you we have reflection on it and we have sensitizing concepts. These four elements are always there in this small grounded theory. We have to learn from, I can indicate it, from the local reality with the help of sensitizing concepts. So the arrow should also be vice versa. And we have data and we have reflection. And these four elements together in interaction will give us knowledge about how to develop the sensitizing concept. So look backwards. Yeah. So this is, if we want to learn something about it, use the local reality. That's what is standing over here. This is the data from that kind of simple conversation because we look backwards what's happening. What would happen if, imagine, look back and what would happen if the researcher would know what he thinks and what she thinks or what both feel. So that's about reality, the local reality, and the written things are about what they have said. And how if this conversation took place in Indonesia instead of in the Netherlands? How would it look like? How to work out the principles of grounded theory. So the principle is, I will go back. There are always four parts. local reality, and we think we have to act based on that local reality, and we have to add data, sensitizing concepts and reflections, and in that interaction we do things. So here we are, and then we go back how to work with the principles of grounded theory. Raised his hand, so I should.
Iya, Bu Yeti, Ibu Yeti ada
Okay, yeah.
pertanyaan?
Okay, Mr. Fahmi Alamsyah. You can talk direct to Mr. Barjan.
Yes, feel free.
Yes, thank you, Miss Yeti.
Yeah.
Mr. Barjan, I want to know about your framework from your slide before. That's the data. What kind of data you mean? Data, primary data or secondary data?
Thank you. In this way, it was. I've stolen it from someone else, so it was secondary data.
The secondary data.
But from the perspective of a short conversation with people who are now talking, we could make data out of it to write down what we have all spoken and use that as kind of primary data.
Okay.
Is that an
If you
answer?
know, yeah, sorry. If you know, in Indonesia, we a little bit to find the data, yeah, a little bit more because you know Indonesia is not same with Europe. Maybe the data is very version, more version. Yeah, if you talk about secondary data from the website, for example, it's different with the primary data. I think that's, I mean.
Yes, and that you're right, but that's then we have to relate that to in which kind of setting you're doing research. If it's about qualitative research, about open research questions and finding new things, then it makes it very interesting to see what companies or in a situation you can find as secondary data and what you can find as primary data related to your sensitizing concepts. So data never exist on their own. They exist in relation to what you're looking for. You see kind of things, and then you have to tell the audience why you think that's relevant data in relation to your focus on your research. That's the same if you do it in terms of more closed research, because then you show that your data are relevant for your testing of your hypothesis.
Okay, so we can note that the kind of data is must be connected to the research question. What kind of question and what kind of research objective maybe that will be answered by Mr. Fahmi. Then you can ask you can find the correct data. Maybe it can from primary data or secondary data. Maybe is that what you mean, Mr. Fahmi?
Yes.
Or the difficulty to find the data?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, if you want to.
Bahasa Indonesia aja nggak apa-apa, Pak. Silakan.
Yeah. If you want to find the data, maybe it's different. Yeah, data collection from primary or from secondary data.
Yes,
it's different.
Yeah, that's different. That's true. But then it's more that you have first your idea. What if you want to know something about what's happening in a company?
Yes.
Then that will be the focus, and then will that be best answered by primary data, so that you go to collect yourself, or that you can do it with secondary data, or that you know that in some circumstances those two are not showing the same perspective on what's happening in reality.
Oke, jadi ini tergantung dari kebutuhannya apa nih Pak Fahmi. Jadi kalau menurut Master Barjan ini, kalau Bapak memang membutuhkan apa data sesuai dengan apa yang dibutuhkan, bisa primary, bisa secondary, seperti itu. So I told Mr. Fahmi that if we want to find about the data, we got to know what kind of research objective that we want to find and what kind of research problem that we want to solve. That's the point that we must take, that how to find the data. I think that's the important point, Mr. Fahmi. Is that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Yeti.
Okay,
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much
Baja.
for your
Okay.
question. Thank you very much.
Bu
And
Yeti,
thank you for showing your face. That's also nice to see.
Okay, silakan.
next question dari
Mr.
from
Adi Parmana.
Adi Permana here.
Okay, this is one for our lecture, Mr. Barjan, the handsome one.
Hello, Mr. Bada.
Please.
Hello,
Nice to have you
Hello,
here.
Mr. Adi.
Yeah. Sadly, this is pandemic, so we only can see you through Zoom. Yeah. Okay. So I would like to ask about conversation. I've noticed that one of the slides is showing the analysis of simple conversation, I think, which is interesting. Yeah, I'm aware that qualitative data, one of them is other than pictures and voice, is also like conversation, right? The data. It's kind of hard to analyze the data or conversation if you have like two different people from two different cultures. For example, from Belanda, from Dutch, Netherlands, and one of them is from Indonesia. The way they respond our question will be different.
Yes.
It depends on their perception on culture. And my question is, how do you solve that? I mean, like, is that a problem? If it is, how do you solve that? How do you make? I don't know. It's not standard, right? So everyone will have their own way of saying things, right? So, but how do you manage those differences and then incorporate it into your research?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Implicitly, there is also the comparison between open and closed research, between testing and hypothesis and developing knowledge with concepts. Because if you have a conversation in the setting of learning something about what's happening in the relation between these two people, then it's fine that there are Indonesian and Brazilian and Dutch people, because they can tell all what they see about the relation between these two, between men and women. Then you can develop your concept about the relation between these two much better. If it's about that you have this conversation and you want to know how people do understand each other and how that will take place all over the world, then you have a more closed research question. And then it's a problem if you make this, different interpretations. Then you should standardize the way you look at that conversation. In the way of an open research question, you're not standardizing your way of looking. In the way of, if you're testing your hypothesis, then you're standardizing your way of looking. For example, if you use Hofstede to describe cultural dimensions, or dimensions, then you use a standardized questionnaire, make it being interpreted by everyone all over the world in the same way. Although that's a dream, but that's what you want to do in a scientific way.
Okay.
So is that an answer to your question?
Yes, but it means that we need to have a good plan to execute the interview, right? So I mean, like,
Definitely.
to have simulation
No.
first with our team or something like that, and considering the factor that will involve in our interview. Okay, noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the
Okay,
question.
one more question, Mr. Pennink, from Mr. Arif Yusuf. Yeah. He asked about the most recent topic for qualitative research, which can drive value to society all around the world. What do you think about that?
So it's I saw already in the chat that question, and I think
Yes.
that's an ambitious question to
Ambitious.
but
Ambitious.
okay, ambitious, we can make an interpretation in terms that, oh, that's much too much, or on the other hand, no, I meant it's yes, it's much too much, but on the other hand, I like also ambition. So, and it's also related, that's in a positive way answering, I would say, to values to society. I would say that's in my research, I focus on small entrepreneurships. And in that part, I was interested in new economic developments in which they pay attention to, in the basic of economics, it's about finding adding value, and they have limited that only to money and return on investments and focusing on economic terms. But in the new economic developments, it's much more on values also related to sustainable development goals. So if we are going to ask a company, what do you do? It's value creation in terms of money. It's value creation in terms of adding to the world that it becomes better, adding to the employees that they feel better, adding much more to people that they feel that is good. And so that's more values, multi-value, and that there are more people involved in what does a company do. Now it looks like that the owner and those who are working in the company do make the decisions, but in the new way of economics is that also society and those people who are living close to companies do contribute to what does a company do. So then we can consider much more that it's not only about profit, it's not only about pollution, it's also about, does it make sense to produce things we don't like anymore?
Okay.
So that's a topic that we should, that as a researcher, we are responsible to relate our research to how does it contribute to improvements in sustainable development goals. But that's a normative statement.
Yes.
I like to add that, and I like to do that, and I feel free from the academic position to do so. And my university is supporting this as well. They are not against it. So I hope this is an answer.
Okay, thank you. Maybe it's related with the publication or the article publication, maybe. Yeah. If we want to publish our dissertation or our article, maybe we can choose the recent topic to get more easier to get published.
Yeah, well,
What
that's
was
a
it?
different question. Sometimes I have chosen to do research in a field that's not directly related to how to improve my number of output articles.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
So I know that I'm making, I shouldn't say, but I'm 4 years before my retirement. So I already decided some 5 years ago, I'm not going to run in a rat race of publishing 20,000 articles. I'm going to publish what I like and what I like to do with students and what is related to sustainable development goals. So that means not the top journals, but some smaller ones. But still, it is fun. I teach students to think about it's much more than money in the world, according to me. So that's my own choice.
Okay, okay, thank you. And one more question from, I don't know which one is, the name is Godlove Ngowelai. I don't know if this is the name as in the text. How can I best analyze my data when I use phenomenological approach? I don't know. How can I use phenomenological approach to analyze the data?
Thank you very much for that question. For that question, I can go back to my last slides. So
Okay.
that fits well. So the last, I will do them very fast, but then I'm almost within 1 hour. So that fits with your scheduling, and it fits also with answering this question.
Perfect, perfect.
And then we come back to that. So thank you for the question. I like the name Godlove. That's also nice. Love God, that's good.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with, I would say, if I am ever allowed to say so. So here it is. If you do the analysis, yeah, there it is. Now we are back. Analyzing the data, that comes up with the last one. I will tell, oh, there it is. It's about, in phenomenology, that's a difficult word. In that approach, it's also, and in the grounded theory, it's about giving descriptions. We classify and categorize our data. We're trying to find and use concepts, and we are connecting these concepts. So, and if you want to know that on a very technical level, then you have to type in that word and try to find out data analysis. You will find lots of good books about that specific approach. But here it is in general. It's about, we need to develop a thick description. It's about that what we do is we try to collect a lot of data. So, and that's most of the time, if you do 20 in-depth interviews and 10 focus groups, then you have a lot of data. And most of the time summarized in pages of books, tens of books, tens of pages. And what you try is go and look and read in these texts to bring it back to what's in the heart of the reasoning. And then it will help if you have at the beginning of all, if you have 10 interviews and you have 100 of pages, then you have to go through it and find out which details are most important and try to label them and say, this is about this topic, this is about this topic. So try to reduce the numbers and try to analyze it with an open way of analyzing. And they call it like open coding. try to find out which parts of your data are the most important and bring them, look at them separated from the main text and see what do they tell me about the sensitizing concept I'm using. That's called open coding. That's one. And secondly, if you have done that, so you have pointed out which parts are most important. And yes, this is a kind of subjective moment, but you can show how it learns you something about a sensitizing concept. You go again through these parts. That means through these parts you have selected, and that means that's actual coding. And this is just the introduction, but you have to look it up in the grounded theory, how this in a technical way goes, because in principle, it's about open coding, actual coding, and then about bringing back these parts to more clustering. And finally, the purpose is, this is too much, you have to come up with elements that help to build up a conceptual model. That is, you go from the mass of data to a theoretical explanation. And how does it look like that? Something, this is kind of format of a theoretical expectation. That is, we have 3 concepts. Those are based on sensitizing concepts. And then you try to relate them. This is finally what you're looking for. I've seen 2 chats, but this is what we finally look for from the sensitizing concepts to something like this. This could be a perfect start for research with a closed research question. How are these concepts related? How is the strength of these relations, and do they interfere? This is kind of statistical effect. You can look it up. You can recognize it if you know a lot about statistics, but you could replace it with management style or Coach and Royon and see how that relates problem solving in a company. That should be a good outcome. It should offer more than what you know in forehand. It should account for your data, and it should be usable. So you should make a conceptual model like this. This is what we call a rough in rough sense, a conceptual model. That's what we make. So, and then this is what I'm not going to do is, and then you could work this out in a case study.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Doctor, can you wrap up in 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Because I'm like to, if you close, oh, I'm going to do it like this. I can wrap up.
Yeah.
Now, that's good. Thank you very much. If you look at qualitative research, and you should keep the focus on theory development, then when formulating the main research question, you pay attention to open research questions. And you know it's open, but you still have a focus. And that focus is related to the concepts, that's number 2 you're using, are being used to describe the empirical world. You will have to know something about sensitizing concepts. Then number 3, data analysis is being carried out, knowing that your data and your analysis, reflection, look and reflect are interwoven. That's something about the extensive way of open coding. Learn something about how to analyze your data, and open coding is different from coding in a quantitative closed research setting. So you have to learn something about that way of coding. Fourthly, you have to know something about the principles of grounded theory. Remember about the local reality, data, sensitizing concepts, and reflections. And you have to end up with a causal model. So the conceptual model is based and formulated on the basis of sensitizing concepts, go to concepts that can be formulated in a more strict way, are not changing anymore, and relate them in a way of, if one is increasing, the other one will increase as well. That's causal reasoning. That's a conceptual model. And then finally, what I didn't pay attention to, but you can have easily look at, if you go and do a case study, then learn something about that you have to compare. Those are the 5 things in which you can do in a research open question and can still develop theory. So this is at the heart of the end of my lecture. I will go back to myself and see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barjan. Maybe we can ask 2 more questions, Mrs. Raras. Is okay?
Yeah, actually we are okay, but Dr. Barjan, do you have any schedule after this?
Yes.
After I have still 30 minutes to go easily.
That's okay. Only
30
two more
minutes.
questions.
2 more
Yeah,
questions.
that's okay. I'm not in a hurry. I reserve time for this to feel relaxed and to give answers. So I feel much appreciated if you raise these questions already. So thank you very much. That's
Okay.
good.
It's from, yes, it's from Miss Faizatul Hikmah. Yeah. She asked about how to make a coding or labeling. Do we have to based on specific references, Bajan, or we just do a coding to find the same word or the same sentence, maybe like that? What
Yes,
should we do about coding?
with coding, but what we do is then you have to remember it's coding in a setting of learning something about the data. That's one, and that's learning something new. So it's looking at, can we find, if we find a phrase, can we find it on another place as well? And can we also find phrases related to that phrase we started with that are telling something more about the sensitizing concept? So on the one hand, we're looking to same things that could confirm that we're in the right direction, but we are also definitely still looking for phrases that are closely related to that, but telling just having some additional info. That's why it's important in coding to realize what you do. If you are only looking at the same ones and counting, then you did an interview in a setting of, I pre-assume that this must be there, and I'm going to check if that's the case. And then you are in a setting of a closed research question. And then you have to realize how that counting helps you to test or to confirm or to reject the hypothesis. That's in a different line of reasoning.
Okay. Do we have to refer to some reference when we do the coding?
If you do the coding, then still you have your data.
Yes.
That might be 100 pages of text of the report of the interviews, and then you have to indicate where you make the choice of which parts you think are important and about which parts for your sensitizing concepts do they contribute. So that's the coding process in principle, and that you have to show also kind of reports, and that's not easy, because how do we present systematic reports in qualitative research? That's hard, because then you have to show how this coding process is working. People from the quantitative setting and testing hypothesis do not believe you on your blue or black eyes.
Yes, correct. Thank you for
yes. So to be very honest, we like to look in, but so then you have to look up, find examples in journals where they use qualitative data.
Yes.
And that's kind of trick to see if you like that way, and then you can refer to that. I'm presenting like they do in that and that article. Then your referees will much more easily accept it, because then you are comparing that you're doing a way that others are also doing.
Okay. Thank you for your.
You're welcome.
Is it answer your question, Ms. Faizatul? I think it's already answered the question. The second is from Ms. Puput. Yeah. How do we present the systematic research report in qualitative research? Yeah. We usually present the theory in chapter 2 and after the introduction. And in qualitative research, should we present theory in research report? Regarding to that qualitative research, it will generate a theory. Is that correct, Ms. Puput? Which one is the first one? Or should we? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it's a good question. I know that in a standardized way, if you test an hypothesis, you have your introduction, you have your research question, you have your theory, you have your test, and then the conclusion about the hypothesis. In a qualitative research, in a research with an open research question, you have again the introduction, you have again your open research question, you have to start with some theory, and then you have your data, and then you have your reflections, and then you come back to the theory. So there's an extra chapter on theory development. So you have to show where you start with your sensitizing concept, what you knew in the beginning, then your data and how the process worked, and then a second chapter on additional on the theory. And to be honest, that's also when you're doing hypothesis testing. At the end of the hypothesis testing, there's always a short part in the hypothesis. And yes, we can reject the hypothesis, and then people should add that has implications for our theory.
Yes.
So and that should be much more bigger in open research questions than with testing an hypothesis.
Okay, so we should make that theory position in the first for guiding our open question? Mr. Barjan?
Yes, I would say so that you make clear that if you have a research, if you have a journal article that you show, this is the starting question. And now I'm going to give you some case descriptions in which I can show you how I can improve my description with a better research question.
Okay.
And
Is
that
it
research
answer?
question,
Yes.
I hope
please.
this answers your question.
Okay. Is it answer the question, Ms. Puput? Where is Mr. Puput? Mr. Puput, Mrs. Puput, sorry.
I think yes, and we have Mr. Fahmi here again. Maybe we can give like our last 3 minutes to
Okay,
Mr.
okay,
Fahmi's
only
question. Is it all
3
right?
minutes more, Mr. Barjan. Okay, thank you very much for your time. Okay, Mr. Fahmi.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Teti. Mr. Parjan, I want to know about the qualitative versus this. Yeah, is it possible if we use the last research, for example, from 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
I would say, why not? If someone comes to me and say, I have research results from 5 or 10 years ago, then I would say definitely, okay, this is interesting. Could you give me a good reason why there is no newer research done anymore? So then you have to show where you have been looking in the literature and in research reports in the university systems, that really is the most updated knowledge that you have. So I would say, yes, it's possible, but then you should add, yes, and I've been looking in all kind of databases with these kind of keywords and this kind of searching procedures, and I couldn't find new reports on this. And then you could use it. And still it could be that you say that you come back and say, I know literature from the year 1950s or 1900, and it might be still really very relevant to come back to these statements. Why not? It's always about if we can tell a scientist about why it's interesting and why it gives up a new perspective for our new sensitizing concepts and our conceptual models, then we can go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fahmi. Maybe this is the end of the asking question session. It's already 3:15 and time is up. More 15 minutes more from the 1 hour that we are already scheduled. Thank you, Mr. Barjan, for your time to give us more insight about qualitative research. Yeah. Even though if qualitative research is from local reality, but we have to still sensitizing the concept to get the objective. Our research is make something new about theory, to emerge one theory, especially from grounded theory. Yeah, I think we have to separate that the theory position from quantitative research and qualitative research, and it's still more interesting, even though the situation is 10 years ago or 100 years ago, if it's still relevant with the situation today, we still can make that situation become our research object. I think that's the point from the session today. Thank you, Mr. Barjan, again, and thank you for the participants already joining for the session today. I think we have more knowledge about qualitative research for Mr. Barjan. Thank you for all, and now I will close the session. Okay, I make it back to Mrs. Raras.